At the start of just about any war, there's always this hope, right? That it'll all be over quickly. But if you look at history, it's just littered with conflicts that were supposed to be weeks long, and, well, they ended up tracking on for years. So that brings us to the big question today. If a war with Iran were to happen, are we looking at another forever war? Let's get into it.
So let's start right there with that fundamental question. Why does this happen over and over again? This optimism. Is it just a massive repeated miscalculation by world leaders? Or is it something more human? That desperate hope that something truly awful just won't last long. It's this hope that's a really critical place to start if we want to understand how these conflicts just spiral.
I mean, this isn't just a hunch, it's a tragic historical pattern. They even have a name for it, the home by Christmas fallacy. Think about it. World War I soldiers genuinely thought they'd be back in a few months. The Soviets and later the Americans had no idea they were signing up for decades in Afghanistan. And Russia, they clearly thought their operation in Ukraine would be quick. Time and time again, the forecast is for a short war, but the reality is just brutal and long.
Okay, so that brings us to the situation in Iran. And right now, the best way to describe it is a dangerous stalemate. What's a stalemate? Well, it's basically when neither side can really win, but neither side is willing to back down either. They're locked in this strategic deadlock, and that, my friends, is a perfect recipe for a very, very long war.
And this slide really shows you why. Just look at this tit-for-tat that's going on. For every punch the US and Israel land, hitting leadership or infrastructure, Iran has a painful counterpunch ready to go. Hitting US bases, threatening Israeli cities, or their ace in the hole, threatening to blockade the Strait of Hormuz. Both sides can keep trading these blows pretty much indefinitely, but it never leads to a knockout. It's just a painful, grinding stalemate. So let's look at some numbers to get a feel for the real impact here. According to sources, about 1/3 of Iran's entire missile arsenal has been wiped out. Now, that is a significant blow, no question about it. But is it a decisive one? And to build on that, here's another key number. Israel says it's taken out 290 of Iran's missile launchers. This definitely hurts Iran's ability to launch a massive coordinated attack. But the key word here is hurts. It doesn't eliminate it. And that's exactly why what's left is still so dangerous. This quote from Professor Muhammad Saloom really hits the nail on the head. It takes one successful drone to shatter a sense of security. See, Iran's weapons production is spread out, with some of it hidden deep underground. So even with fewer missiles, as long as they can make and launch anything, there's still a huge strategic threat. And so the stalemate just continues. So how do you break a stalemate like this? Well, you have to climb what strategists call the escalation ladder. You have to take bigger, riskier steps. But both paths up are incredibly dangerous. Option 1, a total energy war, which would probably trigger a global energy crisis. Or option 2, a ground invasion. We're talking high casualties and probably very low public support back home. Both of these options are so catastrophic that nobody really wants to go there. So given that deadlock, you'd think this is doomed to go on forever. But there's actually a very strong case to be made for a short war. Believe it or not, all sides have some really powerful reasons to just find an exit, declare victory, and go home. Let's break down why. The signals from the top couldn't be clearer. Here you've got a quote from the US president in late March, basically promising a fast exit. And this isn't just talk. It's about managing what the public expects. It's setting the stage for a way out. For the US, the logic is pretty compelling. No one wants a repeat of the forever wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And with midterm elections coming up, a war that tanks the economy is a political disaster. For Israel, you could argue they've already hit some of their main goals. Iran's programs are damaged, their power in the region is weaker, so why not just claim victory now and keep the option to strike again later if they have to? And what about Iran's side of it? Well, ending the war stops the bleeding, right? It stops the destruction. And crucially, the regime survived the first big hit. It's proven it can hang on. If the fighting keeps going and escalates, they risk a total collapse of their society. So why not just take the W, as they say? Claim you stood up to the big guys and start the long process of rebuilding. But, of course, it is never that simple, is it? For all those powerful reasons to end this thing quickly, there are equally powerful forces pushing in the exact opposite direction, towards a long, drawn-out fight. And the biggest argument for keeping the fight going really comes down to this: unfinished business. Think about it. The Iranian regime is still in power. Its nuclear material? Probably not secured. It can still make weapons, and you can bet it's learning how to hide them better. And a regime that survives this kind of attack will likely come out even more radical. From this point of view, stopping now means leaving the job half done.
And that's the question that leaders in the US and Israel would face from their own citizens. If you stop without a clear, total victory, the public is going to ask, what was the point? What did we sacrifice all this money and all these lives for if the main threat is still sitting there?
This leads us right into this powerful psychological trap called the sunk cost fallacy. It's that little voice in your head that says, we've already come this far, we've invested so much, we can't stop now. Even if it makes no logical sense to continue, the pressure to justify all the past sacrifices by pushing just a little further can be overwhelming. And that is how short conflicts turn into forever wars.
And then you've got maybe the single biggest unresolved problem of all, the Strait of Hormuz. This is Iran's ultimate trump card. They control one of the most critical arteries for global trade, and they are not giving that up for nothing. The US can't just pack up and go home, leaving this vital choke point in the hands of a hostile Iran. This one issue, all by itself, could keep this war going indefinitely.
And you can't ignore the personal politics here, either. For Israel's prime minister, a long war could actually be politically useful. He needs a big, clear win for his next election, and, well, a national security crisis is a pretty convenient way to slow down those corruption trials he's facing. The incentives for him might point towards a longer war, not a shorter one.
So when you put this all together, what this conflict has really done is opened a Pandora's box. There are no good options left on the table, there are no easy solutions, every single path forward seems to be loaded with risk and the potential for even more chaos.
And any hope for a diplomatic solution? It seems to have already crashed and burned. I mean, just look at this timeline. Pakistan tries to make a deal, a ceasefire is announced, but just hours later, the whole thing falls apart. The window for a peaceful way out isn't just closing, it might have already slammed shut. So when you combine the military stalemate, the psychological traps, and the political games, the conclusion from our sources is pretty much unavoidable. Everything spells trouble.
And that leaves us with the final, really unsettling question of this explainer. It's the core dilemma of this whole thing. How does a war like this ever truly end? When every possible outcome, a short war, a long war, victory, or defeat, seems like it only leads to more instability and more chaos.